Welcome back to Topic Thunder. I'm Ben Jordan along with Brooks, and we have a very special guest with us. In the past, we told you guys that we wanted to start doing more interviews with different cool and different people that have cool different stories and different projects that they have going on. And this is the first of those interviews that we're going to be doing. And so I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine. His name is Edward Payson. He has a number of different projects that he's done. Personally, my favorite, you may have, if you follow me on social media, you may have heard me say this once or twice in reference to Edward, is that he made one of my absolute favorite movies that I have ever seen. It's called the Cohasset snuff film. And if I'm not mistaken, that's one of, if not your first film you made. Is that right?
It was my third film. So I had made a documentary and then a feature film that I consider kind of like my college thesis before that was never actually fully released. I still am trying to release that, but yeah, technically my third film.
I loved it. It was one of those movies I tell everybody. I compare it to the movie Seven, where you watched it for the first time, and the first time you watch it, you're just enraptured in it because you don't know where it's going to go, and then there's so many twists and turns along the way that just kind of blew my mind. I remember it was one of the most fun experiences that I ever had watching a movie for the first time. And I always like to put you over whenever I can when it comes to that.
This is Hyena Gallery in Burbank, California. We're an art gallery that really specializes in the darker and macabre things. And there's always a bit of true crime stuff here. I got this really great piece by Charles Manson I can show you. We also have another great piece by John Wayne Gacy. But this isn't really what you care about, is it? I know you came here to see the really rare stuff, and I have probably the holy grail. This is the disc, man. This is everything you want to know about the Colin Mason murders.
Colin, please. This isn't a movie.
Not yet. We have his daily blogs.
Get your head in the game. You got a killer on the loose.
All the plotting and
we were able to determine that he had a night vision camera.
we even have some of his victim stuff on there.
Get out of my face!
But you can actually see him going crazier and crazier.
It's terrifying that someone so young could be so sick.
And it's just such a glimpse into his mind.
What are you doing?
I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do with this, but when it gets out there, I think it's going to blow people's minds.
Brooks, I know you have some questions about the filmmaking kind of aspect of this, so I'm gonna kick it over to you and then let you kick it off before we get into the trailer for his new film.
Yeah, great, Edward. Again, thanks for joining the show. I usually lead the show, so Ben's leading this, and I love it. So I just kind of have to sit back and just kind of see what's going on. And as a filmmaker, I'm interested by your motivation. What about capturing something, anything on film appealed to you so much that you've dedicated your life to it? You've made it your life's work, essentially, correct? What about that process, capturing a person or something? What about it really just like, that's my thing?
You know, I really didn't know anything about it growing up in New England until, honestly, until like we had Christmases and stuff like that. And the family camera was handed over to me to do the Christmas videos. And I would do these stupid little commentaries or start filming action figures rather than filming my cousins and stuff opening gifts. And then my family would see that and be like, what the hell is this? But it was so fun.
Christmas '87, and it's like, it's all,
yeah. And I had no idea that, like, anything in the film world existed, because, when I would say, back in the day, filmmaking wasn't the only thing when you're a real little kid that you wanted to do. Obviously, like, I want to be a professional football player and all this stuff. And, no matter what you said, growing up in a pretty much blue collar area, like, no matter what you said, it was kind of met with like, yeah, but really focus on this and go to college and get a business degree and all that kind of thing. It wasn't until actually high school where it became something that I actually started going after. I had just moved to Waltham, Massachusetts, and I started going to this school that just happened to have this high school that just happened to have a screenwriting program. And it was very much set up like a college screenwriting program where you met twice a week, and it was just a 2-hour class where you just, the final thing of the class, the final project was you had to come up with a full feature-length script, and I'm talking about as like a sophomore in high school. So you had to come up with a feature-length script, and then you had to workshop it in front of the class where people would all kind of be different characters. And mind you, it wasn't a very popular class. There was only 7 people in the class. It was the first time they were ever offering it was that year. But from there, I was hooked. I hadn't done any filmmaking classes. My old high school didn't actually offer anything, related to that. Or maybe it did, but it was more like, oh, here's a, $50 camera from Walmart, go film stuff. This actually had like a green screen we could use. It had like all the state-of-the-art like Mac computers that we could use to edit our stuff. And it was all in high school. So basically, from there, I kind of got involved with all the stuff related to filmmaking. We had a music video class. We had a class where, the other thing I didn't mention was like the school had access to a public access channel. And they basically gave us free reign as students, like, hey, whatever you want to make, put on this channel, as long as it's,
not
the FCC doesn't shut us down. Yeah.
FCC compliant.
Yeah. So we would make these like weird music videos and all these different things. We actually, I don't even know how we got away with this. We like did our like this amateur MMA thing in someone's backyard where people would actually bleed and stuff, and they just put it on there. Kids like bleeding all over the place. Like,
you don't say.
Yeah.
Listen, it's funny you say that, Edward, because we talk on this show a lot about education and high school education. And we talk about how we don't encourage kids to do something artistic. And this is a perfect example. You're speaking to our audience. What we've been telling people for so long is that when you take these programs out of high schools, you don't know what you're limiting. You never would have gone on this path that you're on had this high school that you went to not offered these classes. That's how this works. So it does speak to what we've talked about.
Right. Yeah. So, and just to follow that up. So from high school, I kind of went on to a state school in Massachusetts, which didn't even have as good of a program as my high school. So that kind of led me in the direction of, if I'm really serious about this, I need to go to New York or Los Angeles. So then fast forward to 2008 or 2007, and I, left the state school in Massachusetts without seeing a place in California, and ended up going to this really small 300-person film school called Columbia College Hollywood. And it was like night and day. Like immediately, like the school, the way it's set up is they had like standing sets that all the students could use at all times. They had like a bar set with like a pool table and like,
cool.
Yeah, seats that you'd see at like a cafe or whatever. You could use those for all your shoots. All the bathrooms there were like different bathrooms that you could use in different shoots. There was like a truck stop bathroom. There was like a high class bathroom. There was like a dance studio bathroom, like weird stuff like that. And they had a few other sets. They had a green screen studio, full sound stage, all this stuff. And then also they had access to cameras that were like, $15,000, $20,000, $50,000 cameras that we could use for our projects. And the thing that differed about this school was other film schools, the racket that they don't tell you before you go, like USCs and stuff like that, is the AFIs, is they actually own all the films you make there. You're not actually able to distribute them or do anything with them. They're supposed to be just for educational purposes. This school actually allows you to do whatever you want with your film. So that kind of like was appealing to me.
Sure.
So then, right when I got access to the equipment, I was hitting the ground running. We were only supposed to make short films and stuff and little things for class, but I was, a really, really ambitious kid in school. And the first film I made was a film called Morbid, a Love Story, which had a 75-person cast, like 35 locations, and we shot it on the weekends with friends and stuff. And awesome. It took like 2 years, but we did it every weekend pretty much for like 2 years. and then I edited it and all that stuff. And went to a bunch of film festivals, and you know, I at the end of it, I was like, oh, I could do so much better than this. But now I look back on it, and I'm like, yeah, I should probably release this. You know, I think there's an audience for it, but that's another story.
Sure. No, and you know, obviously you get to LA and you've never left. You're still in that area, and you're doing all kinds of commercials. I'm always seeing you posted, hey, I've got a commercial shoot. I'm looking for talent here, looking for talent there. So yeah, you've been hustling this entire time in LA, and now you've got this new project, which I think is something that is going to really, I think, catch on in the mainstream, because you're covering a topic that has gotten a little bit of traction, but I think you're taking a little bit of a different angle from it. So what I want to do first, before we get into it, is play the trailer for everyone, and so they can get a flavor of what we're talking about, and then when we come back, we'll dive in to the movie itself. That sound good?
Perfect.
All right.
Nostalgia is such an interesting thing to me because so many people place it in different categories.
Nostalgia for me definitely brings me back to when I was younger, when I didn't ache, before I had responsibilities, before I had a full-time job.
It's like a microwave. You're reheating leftovers. Nostalgia is the leftovers. You remember it being so good, it was such a great meal, but it's never going to be as good as it was when you first had the meal.
Back then, I put tons of time, tons of energy, tons of love into getting a box, opening it, smelling it, feeling it, reading these guides, these books. Everything in my mind is vivid. Even looking back at consoles, old boxes, when you see Super Nintendo boxes now, they're bright, everything's crazy.
The reason I wanted to go back and play these old games and collect them, I had a deeper connection with them. I had a more intimate experiences playing with them. I thought they were just more well-made games, like core gameplay. You start to connect certain games with certain people you played them with back in the day, like your friend down the block.
Physical media is something that I think is kind of dying away a little bit. You know, you see these streamers and people that are playing games, there's barely anything on the table, and you know, everyone kind of thinks of like a retro gamer or a collector as messy almost. For somebody who's a collector, I want to collect the physical media, like I want to have the case with the game inside of it so I can just, you know, hug it and hold it.
What do we care about, right? We care about pop culture, especially in America. Like, it's so American. It's Americana. Like, having physical products, you know, it was capitalism. I mean, 70s, 80s, 90s, think of how many toys came out, how many actual physical products. And us now trying to actually get that stuff back is a representation of preserving culture. Preserving the culture that matters to us, the culture that we grew up with.
I've seen collecting destroy people.
There's a dark side where it can interrupt relationships.
I wouldn't recommend to the common person to fill up an entire room in their house of video games or movies or anything, which is what I do. I mean, we all have our own personal reasons for doing it. It's more of it's a niche thing. So, I mean, nobody does this because this is the thing to do. We just do it because we want to in some way or another, and we may all have our different reasons.
So there you go. So yeah, what I think is great about this is because I've kind of watched from afar, being your friend on Facebook. This film kind of happened a little bit organically, if I'm not mistaken. This kind of started as you were just kind of getting into collecting games yourself. And then all of a sudden you started getting into the culture, and you were like, wow, this is really cool. There's a lot going on here. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little probably longer than you're probably thinking. I've started collecting specifically Sega Genesis stuff in 2014, I would say. And you know, before that, I was collecting just pretty much anything I could get my hands on retro, just kind of trying to get that piece of nostalgia and that kind of thing. But you know, I think by 2014, I really started focusing on Sega Genesis, and I'm at like 585 games at this point for Genesis, and that's like 99% or 98% complete in box, or at least boxed. Not very many that are just like the games. I just got this one today. Just random.
No, I remember that. I remember
yeah,
that.
This is a fun one. This is a fun one because you don't see a lot of Genesis carts that have this, which is like the you connect your controllers right to the game.
Oh.
Basically, this you wouldn't actually connect the controllers themselves. You connect an adapter that makes it so you can play 4 players on it. So it's like one of the only games you could play like 4-player tennis on and stuff.
No shit, that's so cool. Like you don't think of that. Right? And I remember seeing it on the shelf at the video game rental place, and was like, I'm not interested in that. But now you look back at it, like, yeah, that's so cool because it's so different.
Yeah, and you know what? Like even a game like that, like the documentary kind of delves on like how the world of retro game collecting is changing. That game was like a $10, $15 game, you know, just like 4 years ago. Now we want to guess what that game goes for?
Oh man, with the way some of these prices are going, I mean, is it
$80? $80.
$150?
Yeah, $80 is the low end. $80 is the low end. It probably goes for around 100. Some people $125 will pay for just this general sports game. And it's just like that. I've gotten games back in 2016 for $100 that are now worth like $750. And we kind of talk about like the induction of like the sealed game market and how that's kind of changed collecting, whereas like comic books and trading cards and all that, like sealed or certifying has been a thing in those fields for a very long time, and it's just actually become serious in retro gaming with you know, people are going crazy because the first like Mario game sold for like $229,000. People are like, oh, that's way too much, money laundering, blah 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, another Mario went for like $2 million. And then another one went for $200.3 million. So I think the sky's the limit as far as these things. And we kind of delve into that. Both, you know, we try to keep it very, very much in the center because there's a lot of people who are against graded games. You know, games are meant to be played. And, you know, you're not doing a service to these games by not playing them. Where other people are like, you know, even the box and the manual and all this stuff, like all the box and everything, all of it is a part of history that we're trying to preserve and, you know, trying to show, you know, just have posterity for years to come. When we're long gone, these games will still survive and they'll still be like in this case that people can admire at a museum somewhere. So that's just one little part of the documentary. We also talk about like really, really rare stuff like you never ever see. I have an example of that as well.
Yeah, please. That's great.
So this, mind you, the controllers are, these are what the controllers look like. They usually just like go right into here.
Yes, I remember that.
So this thing is from 1977, and it's called the Video Sports V7, Venture Electronics Video Sports V7, and I actually got that not even like on purpose. A neighbor of mine the other day was like, I have all these old PlayStation games I don't want. Do you want them? And then when I got there, I saw a text that I missed from her that was like, oh, by the way, I have this gaming thing in my attic since 1978. You know that as well. And she didn't even like listen. She didn't even like wait for my answer. She just put it in the box, and that was that. And that you don't even find like pictures of online anymore. Even on like the Wikipedia and stuff, it's like an empty picture.
No shit. Wow.
Yeah, so there's just like a lot of stuff like that. Like we have this guy in the documentary from Holland who basically he has a Nintendo Wii that was made for the Queen of England, a solid gold Nintendo Wii that was made for the Queen of England by the THQ company when they were promoting a game called Big Family Games. And basically they canceled it without telling the press or anything like that because the company was going to go under. But like as far as the press knew, the Queen was playing this golden Wii and loving it and all this stuff. So like when THQ went bankrupt, a big end collector came in and just offered like a suitcase full of cash, got all the prototypes, and then now this guy, I think he bought the Wii for like around $4,000 or $5,000. Now like he's getting offers of like $500,000 to $1 million.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So like
Brooks,
a lot of one of the kind stuff we talk about.
Brooks, you had a question? Do you have a question?
Oh, actually, I remember I had Sega Genesis OG and like out of the box, and it's one of my favorite gaming systems. So my favorite game is Phantasy Star 2. I dedicated my early part of my life to that game, and so I just got to know what your favorite Genesis game is. It's a simple question,
My
but
favorite, it's mostly nostalgia, but also because it's just an incredible game, is Gunstar Heroes. It's one of the
nice.
first Genesis games I got, but also one of the first like 2-player Genesis games I got that I played and beat with my brother growing up. So yeah, I would say that. And then like later on when because I think as a kid I pretty much had the biggest collection around, but that was nothing compared to what I have now. Like I think I had like 45 games, and everybody's like, oh, like Ted has the most Genesis games like around. Let's go to his house. But all these games I didn't know existed, especially like games from Japan, like Alien Soldier, which is essentially like Gunstar Heroes. It's made by the same company, but it's like improved on everything. And it's now a 1-player game, but like it's pretty much just like 25 levels that are long each, and then a boss fight at the end of each level that gets progressively hard, huge monsters and stuff. Really, really expensive game. I think it's like a $700 game right now.
That's amazing. I got a question. When you're doing this documentary, you're talking to all these different people, and you're seeing all the different memorabilia that these different guys have. Was there one where you were just maybe it's the golden Wii that you already mentioned, but is there one item where you're just like blown away that existed, or it existed in that condition, or that someone had it? What was there something that kind of blew your mind along the way?
Sure. So we went to Florida for one of these interviews to meet a man named Eric Nierman, who runs something called the VVG Club. And he's kind of like an infamous character. Like the collectors love him, but like he's kind of the face of like all these like hate videos and stuff from like people who don't understand video game collecting or spending money on sealed video games or anything like that. So there was this video that came out by this guy who isn't even an authority in the video game world. I think he does speedrun videos. This guy Seth something. He released this video that went viral that got like 7 or 8 million about like water, grading company being a scam and all this stuff, and didn't really have any. It was all like hearsay and like basically a propaganda video. But like all the people who like you know how it is, because you've dealt with like Trump people and stuff. Like basically people already believed that it was a scam, so they just took this as fact and then posted that to all the different forums. Like we even got a review for the movie before it even came out, before it was even shown anywhere, being like, oh, this is touted for collectors by collectors, and but it's really just people showing their WATA graded games, when really in the movie there's only like 1 of 5 segments that anything to do with graded games. So the person never watched the movie. They just decided to give a 1-star rating for that fact. And for people who don't know, these are WATA graded games here.
Yes, so I've seen that now. Those of you that may watch Pawn Stars, I believe that there was a Super Mario Brothers cartridge that was WATA graded like this, that was super, super rare and super, super special. I don't know if that's something that you covered in the movie, or you know the story I'm talking about, but there's some sort of like 1 of 1 where it was like the Mario game that went in the console that was to be played in the stores or some crazy shit like that. That's supposed to be worth a whole bunch of money. Do you know what I'm talking
about? Collecting has been around for a long time, right? There's been I used to do part-time work on a weekend at a comic shop, and that kind of started the thing you thought was a toy or a piece of entertainment, and that was the only value it had. And then those things became very valuable. That first Spider-Man, I think, like when it first hit like 6 digits, it was like, for a comic book. And now you're talking about $700-800 video games, which again, for a different generation, that's kind of hard to swallow. If you could speak to maybe the if there are differences, if you're familiar with video game, and just like that initial pushback of the why don't you understand that this is a collectible now? It's 25 years old.
I think a lot of it has to do with jealousy, and people, will just kind of latch on to, I can't afford that, so let me hate on the person who can, and say why they're wrong and why they're not a collector and why I'm a collector, because I only collect like in the cart stuff. I don't care about the box and stuff. So obviously I'm right. But I also think a lot of people, there's a lot of misinformation that people are just taking as fact. You know, as I spoke with like that video,
Right.
you know, with Seth and stuff, where a lot of people just took that as fact. And, you know, every single retro video game group that I was in on Facebook, you had someone spewing like, oh, here's this video. Like, I knew it was a scam and all this stuff. When there was no scam, like there was no proven scam. There was no anything like that. And people even say, you know, they're living in this like fantasy world where they're like, you know, WATA games aren't worth anything anymore. When every single week there's a new auction where a new WATA game is going for either, you know, double figure, triple figures, you know, more than triple figures. So it's just like all, you know, just two sides of like this community that both want to be right and don't want to meet anywhere in the middle. And I feel like we tried to meet in the middle with the documentary. And I think we were cut off before, but what I was talking about was this guy, Eric. We went to his collection in Florida, and it was like one of the different collections in the movie because his collection's worth so much. It's a $20 million video game collection, but it's only 300 games. Yeah.
Wait.
300 games? What?
Okay, so you at least have to kind of put this in perspective because we're all about trying to break things down in perspective. Like, give me some of the values of one of these or five of these games, right?
So that video game, so the video game you saw on Pawn Stars, the guy was trying to get $1 million on Pawn Stars. He couldn't get it on Pawn Stars, but then a year later, he ended up getting $2.3 million for the same game. Now, so this guy Eric has a higher graded version of that game, or maybe just the same, but then he has like 6 of them. And then he has like a whole set. Then he has like a whole set of like, you know, the whole like, you know, version 1 through 7 of games, and they're all in prime, pristine, graded 9.6, perfect condition. But he goes through it like, so back in 2009 or 2018, he became like, you know, the most hated person in the retro field because he one day just like dropped $1 million, you know, and people are like, what? $1 million? $1 million on these super rare games, knowing that they were going to go up in value. Most of these games like retailed around like $13,000. He paid like $13,000. Like his biggest one, he paid $13,000 for Mario that's now worth like $100,000. He spent like, you know, he spent $85,000 on one that's now worth like close to $2 million. But the cool thing about this and the weirdest thing about this is like we had already been to all these collectors' houses, and you know they have everything in box. They don't specifically deal with like sealed stuff. These are all sealed games, but because the value was so high, he can't have them at his home.
Right.
So
you have him like a vault,
we had
right?
to give him. We were trying to shoot with him for like 3 or 4 months before we actually could get down there. We had given him some dates, but then like, you know, either he was unavailable or we were unavailable. When we finally got down there, we had to give him like 2 weeks notice because he had to spend 2 weeks going to like 20 or 25 vaults throughout Southern Florida to pick up $100,000 worth of things here, $100,000 worth of things here, because video games aren't considered like art, like a painting or like, you know, comic books and stuff. And because there's so few people that can assign a value to these things, there's like a limit for $100,000. So, you know, some they have like 2 games.
Yeah.
Some banks he would have 1 game, you know, and then where we didn't even get the actual address to the location, which ended up being ended up being a glass conference room in the middle of like a telemarketing office that we got the address for at the hotel the day before. And we go there, and it was the first time in this movie that you've ever seen these games together in one place, because they've all lived in all these vaults all over the place. So yeah, just like each time he's picking something up, to know that like, oh, that's $1 million, that's $100,000, that's, you know.
Don't you see that as the values of these games start to get higher and higher and higher, it is going to attract a different set of investors in these types of things. The the Gary V's of the world, the ultra rich guys that are looking for those little things like that. Do you foresee that maybe propels this to an even bigger explosion?
So like cars, like I'm thinking antique cars and classic cars, that kind of thing. Like, or you said artwork already.
Yeah, you know, like there is some kind of criticism with that, but with anything that's collectible, that happens. It's inevitable. And that's another thing we touch upon is like, even if Wata Games didn't exist, or the VGA, which is the other major grading company, didn't exist, somebody would do it because the market calls for it. You know, and we talked to all these different collectors all over the place. We didn't just talk to people who collected games. Like, we talked to this one guy, that guy who had the Wii in Holland. He only collects consoles. He doesn't collect games. He only collects consoles, and he has over like 350 consoles. And he has like the entire like the GameCube collection, even ones that were like only given away in magazines as like prizes and or on Facebook or places like that. So like that Golden Wii is one of like 10 of one of a kind products that he has that are actually licensed. That he like literally will track people down and pay huge sums of money for, or travel, you know, across the country or across the world to pick something up and then travel back because he doesn't, you know, trust the shipping or something like that. So we have a lot of stories like that, and then a lot of just you know, a lot of stories about people getting things, you know, at yard sales and stuff that they go on to find out is worth so much more, or they know that they're paying $5 for something that's worth like, you know, thousands of dollars. Like we one of the biggest criticisms is we have Dennis Kahn in the film, who's the head of Wata, but we don't just talk to him as the head of Wata. Like the way we set him up in the film is he has a whole segment where he talks about being a video game collector first, and then we introduce him as the head of Wata. So you see that when he was 14 years old, he went to a yard sale with his dad and paid $2 for stadium events, which is now a $35,000 game. And back then, for $2, he knew it was a $35,000 game. And he just talks about how he was like shaking and stuff. And we actually have the footage of him back then after with his parents, like just talking about how he just got so much, you know, money worth of games for $2 a piece. And we have a bunch of those kinds of stories in there. And then the ones that we don't actually have footage of, we have some funny reenactments. We have one guy, a really funny one where a guy talks about how he got invited to look at these video games by this girl, but really she was bringing him back to have a threesome with her and her husband. But they had like, you know, $160,000 worth of games just scattered around this like trailer on the ground. So he's like, oh, I won't take the sex, but I'll take the game. So he'd have a whole reenactment of this whole, like him going to the trailer park. And yeah, people love that. There's a funny cameo in it.
That's fantastic. So where and when can people see this documentary? Where can they find it if they want to check it out for themselves?
So we've had a little bit of problems with that, only because COVID has kind of set all the time frames back for everything. We do have Megacat Studios, who's like the forefront of retro games for new games for old consoles. They're making like all like 16-bit and 8-bit games now. They actually reached out to me and wanted to make the homebrew stuff. So they're gonna make our NES style box with like our Blu-ray and stuff like that. It's gonna have a fold-out coaster.
Cool.
It's gonna have a manual. It's gonna have all that stuff. Yeah. So that's being worked on right now. We should have details about that in the next few weeks. And then as far as streaming goes, it's going to be on Amazon Prime probably within the next month.
Perfect.
Plex a little bit shorter than that. Tubi after that. And then we basically, we have a Facebook page. We're going to be updating whenever anything goes live. But right now we have all the purchase deals that have happened, but we don't have the actual dates yet for where things are going live. But should be very, very soon. Within the next week, we should have at least one place that's live.
And then, of course, your other projects are also on Amazon Prime, a couple of them, right?
Right, yeah. So Cohasset Snuff Film, which you talked about, that is on Amazon. It's not Amazon anymore. It's on Plex. You can watch it there for free. You can watch my other documentary, Unsigned, which is about 3 bands trying to make it in Los Angeles. That's on Plex and Amazon Prime, I believe. And then also my last documentary that came out in 2020, Our Friend John, which
my friend Dave
we talked about briefly. But yeah, my friend Dave. Our Friend John,
Damn it,
which is
man.
about my brother and his friends made a film for their friend who died of sickle cell anemia. He was writing a script before he died, and they all banded together, all having disabilities of their own, to make their friend's film, which is a horror film as well.
Great.
That's so
So yeah, all those you can watch for free on either Plex or Amazon Prime. So
Right. Edward, for those that just want to find out more about you, give us where people can reach out and find you.
sure, I post most frequently, I would say, on Amazon. I'm sorry, not Amazon, on Instagram. Instagram, my handle is An Antihero Production with underscores underneath each of the words. So An Antihero Production.
Too. I'll make sure it's up on the screen for you as well.
Perfect. And then all my different films have their own Facebook pages. So there's Our Friend John documentary Facebook page, the Cohasset Snuff Film Facebook page, and then Rarity Retro Video Game Collecting in the Modern Era page. So and then there's just one for my production company, an Antihero Production. So if you want to check out all
Perfect.
the projects, even commercials and stuff that are happening, I post on that pretty regularly as well.
And then
Awesome.
before we let you go, I always like to find out, you got anything else working? What's the next project? Are you even thinking about the next project at this point, or are you just still focusing on this project?
Next project's almost done. So
I knew it.
While
You're
we were
a
shooting
filmmaker,
this-
of course it is.
Yeah. So while we were doing this, so the one caveat about COVID is travel was so cheap if you were stupid enough to do it. We all had gotten vaccinated very, very early, so we were fine to travel and stuff. But like, I talked about us going to Florida. We got like round trip tickets to Florida for like 40. So we were going all
Whoa.
over the country, not just for this documentary, but for another one. And the other one is called In Search of All American Massacre, and it's about a lost Texas Chainsaw Massacre film that was made and completed in 2000, was supposed to, and then never came out. Well, filmmakers disappeared, and no one talked about it ever. We're trying to figure out why.
No shit, that sounds amazing.
But there's a lot of twists and turns.
I can't wait to bring you back and talk about that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Edward, as always,
definitely,
man, I love talking to you. I love talking about your projects. You always find a cool angle, a cool story, something different. And you take it from a different approach, and that's what I love about the work that you do, man. I can't say enough about everything that I've watched of yours, and I love watching you grind, man. I from afar, I think it's awesome to see someone being creative every single day, and that's what I see you doing. You're always doing something creative every single day. So kudos to you, my man.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
All right. Until next time, this has been Ben and Brooks, and we're talking with Edward here on Topic Thunder.